The silence in that courtroom was deafening. My own flesh and blood, my daughters, stood there looking at me with cold, unfamiliar eyes. "She was never our mother," Emma said, her voice unwavering as she stared directly at me. "Not in any way that matters." I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. 17 years of bedtime stories, kissed scraped knees, homework help, and driving lessons, all erased with 9 cruel words. The judge looked at me with pity. My ex-husband sat there with a satisfied smirk, and my daughters, my beautiful Emma and Sophia, stood as witnesses for the prosecution, ready to destroy me. But let me start from the beginning, because you won't believe how I ended up here, fighting for my freedom while my own children testified against me. 6 years ago, I had everything. A gorgeous 5-bedroom house in an exclusive neighborhood. A successful husband who was partner at his law firm. 2 beautiful teenage daughters who were smart, talented, and the center of my world. I volunteered at their school, hosted the neighborhood barbecues, and had the kind of life people envied. "You're so lucky," my friends would say. "David is such a catch, and your girls are perfect." If they only knew what was happening behind closed doors. David had always been controlling. But I didn't realize how much until it was too late. He managed all our finances, decided where we went on vacation, chose what I wore to his firm's events, and even determined who I could be friends with. I was living in a beautiful cage, but a cage nonetheless. "It's for your own good," he'd say with that smile that never reached his eyes. "You know you're not good with money, Sarah. Remember when you nearly bankrupted your parents?" I'd been 19 when I made some financial mistakes, just 19. But David never let me forget it. But here's where it gets interesting. What I didn't know was that while David controlled every aspect of my life, he was secretly destroying our family from the inside. Over years, he had been systematically turning my daughters against me. Little comments here and there, small suggestions, subtle manipulations. "Your mom's not very bright when it comes to important things," he'd tell them. "That's why I handle all the decisions. Your mom would be lost without me," he'd say, laughing it off like a joke. I didn't realize it then, but every time he protected me from making decisions, every time he spoke for me in conversations, every time he corrected me in front of the girls, he was planting seeds of doubt about my competence, my worth, my very ability to be their mother. But that's not even the most shocking part. One day, I discovered something that would change everything. I was cleaning our home office when I found a folder hidden behind the filing cabinet. Inside were bank statements for accounts I'd never seen before, and documents showing millions of dollars had been moved offshore. My hands trembled as I flipped through page after page of evidence that David had been hiding assets, massive amounts of assets, for years. As a high-powered attorney specializing in divorce law, he knew exactly how to conceal money, and there was something else in that folder, a lease agreement for an apartment across town, dating back 3 years, and photos of David with another woman and a child who looked about 2 years old. My entire body went cold. He had another family. I made copies of everything, hid them at my sister's house, and tried to figure out what to do. I was trapped, no access to money, no career of my own after being a stay-at-home mom for 15 years. And to daughters who had been subtly influenced to see their father as the competent parent and me as the decorative, not too bright housewife. When I confronted David about what I'd found, his entire demeanor changed. The mask of the loving husband fell away completely. "You've never been smart, Sarah," he said with a coldness that still makes me shiver when I think about it. "Did you really think I'd let you take half of what I've built? I've been planning this for years." His words hit me like physical blows. Years. He'd been planning this for years. "The girls will choose me," he continued. "They already know who the capable parent is, and as for the money, good luck finding it. Better lawyers than you have tried." I filed for divorce the next day. What followed was a nightmare beyond anything I could have imagined. David didn't just fight dirty, he fought apocalyptically. He emptied our joint accounts before I could access them. He canceled my credit cards. He told our friends and neighbors that I was having a mental breakdown. He even suggested to my own parents that I might need psychiatric help, but the most devastating. Betrayal was yet to come. Emma was 16 and Sophia was 14 when the divorce began. David immediately filed for full custody, claiming I was mentally unstable and financially irresponsible. And then came the bombshell that brought me to my knees. Both my daughters submitted statements supporting their father's petition. They wanted to live with him full-time. The statements were filled with evidence of my incompetence as a mother. Times I'd forgotten to pick them up from activities, which happened twice in 14 years. How I couldn't help with math homework beyond 8th grade. How I'd embarrass them by crying at school functions. Reading their words was like having my heart ripped from my chest. Every memory I cherished, singing them to sleep, nursing them through fevers, cheering at their games, helping with science projects until 2 a.m., none of it mattered. David had rewritten our family history, and my daughters had accepted his version as truth. But I refused to give up. I hired a forensic accountant with money borrowed from my sister. We began tracking the hidden assets. And I found a lawyer who specialized in high-conflict divorce and parental alienation. That's when things escalated to a level I never could have anticipated. 3 months into the divorce proceedings, I was arrested. The charge? Financial fraud and embezzlement from David's law firm. According to the evidence, I had been stealing from the firm for years, using the money to fund a secret gambling addiction. There were bank records, surveillance photos of me entering casinos. Even witness statements, all of it fabricated, of course, but it was elaborate, detailed, and utterly convincing. David had used his connections, his knowledge of the system, and his understanding of evidence law to create a perfect frame. I spent 2 nights in jail before my sister could arrange bail. When I got out, I discovered David had been granted emergency temporary custody of the girls. I wasn't even allowed to contact them. As I sat in my sister's guest bedroom that night, having lost my home, my children, and potentially my freedom, I felt a transformation happen inside me. The scared, compliant woman David had crafted over 17 years of marriage died. In her place rose someone new. Someone who would fight with everything she had. They've picked the wrong woman to destroy, I told my sister, a calm certainty in my voice that surprised even me. What came next was an 18-month battle that tested every ounce of my strength and resourcefulness. I worked 3 jobs to pay my legal fees. I spent every spare moment researching, gathering evidence, and building my case, both for the divorce and my criminal defense. Slowly, meticulously, my team and I began unraveling David's web of lies. The forensic accountant followed money trails across 5 countries. My criminal attorney found inconsistencies in the surveillance footage. And most importantly, we discovered that the assistant district attorney prosecuting my case had gone to law school with David and had received substantial consulting fees from his firm. The criminal charges were eventually dismissed. But the damage to my reputation and my relationship with my daughters had been done. Throughout this ordeal, Emma and Sophia refused to see me. They believed I was a criminal, a liar, a failure as a mother. David had completed his masterpiece of parental alienation, which brings me back to that courtroom. To that moment when my daughters stood to testify against me in the final custody hearing. Emma, when first, tall and poised in a conservative blue dress that David had obviously selected. She spoke about how I had always prioritized my own needs and never provided the stability that Dad did. She described incidents from her childhood, all of them twisted versions of what had actually happened. When she mentioned the time I abandoned her at the mall, I had been in the restroom when she wandered off. I couldn't stop the tears. Then Sophia took the stand, my sensitive, artistic younger daughter, now unrecognizable in her father's carefully crafted image. Mom was always the fun parent, she said, making it sound like an accusation. Dad was the one who made sure we did our homework, ate properly, had structure. Mom was more like a babysitter. We had sometimes. Each word was a dagger. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood, trying to maintain composure. But then something unexpected happened, something that changed everything. As Sophia continued her testimony, she mentioned a specific incident, like when I had pneumonia in 3rd grade. And Mom just gave me cough syrup instead of taking me to the doctor. Dad had to come home from his business trip to take care of me properly. My attorney's head snapped up. She passed me a note. That never happened. David was in Hong Kong when Sophia had pneumonia. I have an idea. What followed was a masterclass in cross-examination. My attorney approached Sophia gently, respectfully. Sophia, that must have been scary, having pneumonia as a young child, she said. Sophia nodded. It was. And you said your father came home from a business trip to take care of you because your mother just gave you cough syrup? Yes. Do you remember what city your father was visiting? Sophia hesitated. I think it was Chicago. My attorney nodded sympathetically. I see. And when your father came home, did he take you to the hospital himself? Yes, Mom didn't want to, but Dad insisted. My attorney then produced medical records and flight manifests. The medical records showed that I had taken Sophia to the emergency room at 2 a.m., where she was diagnosed with pneumonia and admitted for 3 days. I never left her side. The flight manifests and hotel receipts showed that David had been in Hong Kong during this entire period. Sophia, my attorney said gently, these records show that your mother took you to the hospital immediately when you got sick and stayed with you for 3 days. Your father was actually in Hong Kong and didn't return until after you were discharged. Do you remember that differently? The confusion on Sophia's face was heartbreaking, but that's not, Dad told me. She looked at David, then back at the documents, then at me, for the first time in over a year. She really looked at me. I remember Mom reading to me in the hospital, she said slowly. And bringing my stuffed penguin from home. My attorney continued this process with several other incidents both girls had mentioned. In each case, she had documentation showing their memories had been manipulated. School records contradicting claims I'd neglected their education, photos disproving allegations. I'd missed important events, witnesses who testified to my constant, loving presence in their lives. By the time my attorney finished, both my daughters looked shell-shocked. The carefully constructed narrative they'd believed was crumbling around them. Then came the financial evidence. The forensic accountant presented his findings, offshore accounts totaling over $12 million. Tax fraud going back a decade. And most damning of all, documentation of the systematic financial abuse David had inflicted on me, keeping me dependent, without access to resources, isolated from support. But the final blow came from an unexpected source. David's assistant of 7 years had come forward with recordings. David had a habit of dictating notes after meetings. And she had secretly recorded conversations where he explicitly discussed his plans to make Sarah look so incompetent no judge would give her a dim E, let alone the kids, in one recording. He laughed about programming the girls to see me as the inferior parent. By the time I'm done, his voice said clearly in the silent courtroom, they'll testify against her themselves if needed. I watched my daughters' faces as they heard their father's voice admit to manipulating them. The shock, the confusion, the dawning horror as they realized they had been used as weapons in his vendetta against me. The judge called a recess after that bombshell. In the hallway, I stood apart, not approaching my daughters, giving them space to process this shattering revelation. They huddled together on a bench, whispering intensely, occasionally looking my way when court resumed. The judge had clearly had enough of David's machinations. He granted me full custody, awarded me half of all marital assets, including those hidden offshore, and referred David to the state bar for ethical violations. David sat there, his face a mask of fury and disbelief as his perfect plan imploded. As we prepared to leave the courtroom, I still didn't know where I stood with my daughters. Were the bonds too damaged to repair? Had David's poison seeped too deeply into their hearts? Emma approached me first, her face streaked with tears, Sophia trailing behind her. Mom, Emma said, her voice breaking. I don't even know what's real anymore. All these years Dad has been telling us. I wanted to pull them into my arms, but I held back. I know, sweetheart. He manipulated all of us. And we have a lot to work through. Can we? Sophia stepped forward hesitantly. Can we try to fix this? I would like that more than anything in the world, I said, finally letting my own tears fall freely. The road to healing wasn't smooth or quick. We started with family therapy, intensive, twice-weekly sessions where we unpacked years of manipulation and rebuilt trust brick by painful brick. There were setbacks, moments when the girls slipped back into defending their father, times when the hurt felt raw on all sides, but slowly, steadily, we reclaimed our relationship. I discovered that beneath the hostile testimony and cold stares, my daughters had been suffering too, torn between parents, filled with confusion, manipulated by the person they trusted most. As for David, justice came in waves. He was disbarred for his ethical violations, criminal charges for financial fraud followed, his carefully constructed empire crumbled, along with the facade of the perfect family man. The other woman, who turned out to be just one of several, left with their child when the money dried up. It's been 3 years since that day in court. Emma is in college now, studying psychology with a focus on family systems. Sophia is a junior in high school, rediscovering her passion for art that David had discouraged. I've started a foundation that helps survivors of financial abuse and parental alienation navigate the legal system. Last month, Emma called me from school. "Mom, I was reading about narcissistic personality disorder for class, and it described Dad perfectly," she said. "I've been thinking about how he controlled everything, even how we saw you. I'm so sorry I couldn't see it then. You were a child," I told her. "He was your father. You weren't supposed to see through it." "I've been having these memories," she continued, "real ones, I think. Like when you taught me to ride a bike and stayed out with me for hours until I got it, or when you helped me write that play in 4th grade and made costumes for all the characters. He tried to erase you, but he couldn't, not completely. Those recovered memories are the greatest gifts, proof that the bond between mother and child is more resilient than even the most determined abuser can destroy." Yesterday, I found a note Sophia had slipped into my purse. It read simply, "You were always our mother. Even when we couldn't remember, you remembered for all of us. Thank you for fighting for us." So that's my story. From the courtroom where my children denied me, to the slow, beautiful rebuilding of what was nearly destroyed. If you're in the darkness now, if someone is trying to turn your children against you, if you feel powerless against a system that seems rigged, don't give up. The truth has a way of emerging, even from the deepest shadows. And to my daughters who may someday hear this, you were never to blame. You were victims too. And my love for you never wavered, not for a single moment, not even when you stood in that courtroom and said I was never your mother. Because I knew, in my heart, that those weren't your words. And I would wait forever for you to find your way back to your own truth. As it turns out, I didn't have to wait forever. Just long enough for the lies to crumble under their own weight. Just long enough for us to find our way back to each other, back to the truth of who we really are as mother and daughters. And that truth is more powerful than any lie, no matter how cleverly told. The judge was right when he told me, as we left the courtroom that final day, "Mrs. Reynolds, your greatest victory isn't in the settlement or even the custody decision. It's that you fought this battle without becoming like your opponent. You fought for your children, not against their father. That distinction will matter more in the long run than anything else." He was right. In fighting to reclaim my children, I also reclaimed myself, not the meek, uncertain woman David had methodically created over our marriage, but the strong, capable mother who would walk through fire for her daughters, the woman who would never give up, no matter the odds. If you're listening to this and fighting your own battle against parental alienation, against someone who's trying to erase you from your children's lives, keep fighting. Document everything. Find experts who understand this specific type of abuse. Build your support network, and most importantly, hold space in your heart for the relationship you'll rebuild when the truth finally emerges. Because it will, the truth always finds its way to the light.